Living in a wealthy city changed my life. The way I think about money, success, and even my own worth, it's all different now. London is a place of extreme wealth, opportunity, and pressure. Some days it pushes you to be your best, other days it makes you question if you'll ever be enough, to be honest. Is chasing success in a city like this worth it? Let's talk about the real cost, financially and mentally, of living in one of the richest cities in the world. So let's talk about money first. Obviously, working in London, the salaries are much better than living in Ireland, to be honest. And I've heard this from a few people. Regardless if you're an analyst or if you're a scientist or a nurse, I believe the salaries are better here. But the higher income potential in London is, of course, a pull and draws a lot of people into the city, I imagine. I've noticed recently that the population has just kind of gotten out of hand. When you walk down the street, it's incredibly crowded, and that can be daunting in terms of competition and who you're actually up against in the workplace. But in terms of monetary value, the salaries are better here. However, on the other side of the coin, the cost of living is incredibly high. So to rent a one-bedroom flat in London is anywhere between 1,300 to 3 grand, depending on what part of London you're in, because London is massive, right? The closer you are to Zone 1, the more expensive your rent is likely to be. However, your work is also more likely to be in Zone 1 or Zone 2. So you're either paying a lot on tube fares or train fares, or you're spending a lot on rent. So even though you're getting paid a higher salary, your cost of living is chewing up a lot of that income. And I know a lot of people who are in their 30s and haven't been able to save and are still in the renting game because they haven't been able to come up with a deposit. So it can be a little bit misleading, and I guess it's something to think about if you're thinking about moving to London. Also, I've been lucky to get a mortgage on this place. However, it is a one-bed flat in London here, and it cost me 300 grand. It was up for 325, and I have amazing negotiation skills, and I managed to bring it down to 300, right? However, if I think about that in Ireland, what I can buy for 300 grand in Ireland, I could probably get a 3-bed detached house with a beautiful garden. So it's all about, what do you want in your life and what are you happy to give up to gain something else instead? There are times when I think, man, should I just move back to Ireland, have an easier life, maybe have less of a mortgage? But then it makes me think, what kind of job could I realistically get in the west of Ireland, which is where I'm imagining I'd love to live, If I want to be on the coast and, near mountains, there's less likely to be more jobs there. So that's why at the minute in my 30s, I'm happy to stay in London because the job market is better and of course the networking can be better too. The thing about London is when you go on the tube here, which is the underground public transport system, right? You can have someone in a business suit that spend, a grand on their attire versus someone who's actually homeless and also riding the tube for free. So there's this really weird, mix of people that's everywhere in London, not just the tube. You could have one street that has £5 million houses, and then the next street directly across from it, you can have council houses or, houses that are a little bit run down and decrepit. It's a really weird thing with London, and it's hard to get your head around if you're new here. But on the plus side of this, it is amazing to be in the same space of people who have obviously done really well for themselves. You could have a millionaire on the tube sitting right beside you, and that could, spike up a conversation or a networking opportunity. Now, let's be honest, people don't like talking to each other here on the tubes. That's a massive, London thing. So if you did start talking to a randomer, they'd just be like, can you leave me alone? But what the point is that there is a lot of opportunity in London. However, there is an awful lot of competition too. So if you were to get a job as an analyst, let's say, and you're on 40 grand as a starting salary in London, there's obviously going to be hundreds of other people that would be interviewing for that job. So even to get that space, there's a lot of expectation from you. You may have to work overtime. You may have to work on a weekend just to show that you're capable and that you can, of course, reach for that next promotion to get 50 grand. So it's something to really think about. It's yes, London has massive salaries. Yes, there's lots of opportunity here, but there's a massive amount of burnout. In the place that I work now, it's the most amount that I've seen people signing off sick because they're absolutely stressed out because teams are understaffed and people are just having to sign off sick because they've got too much of a workload on. And this is a constant thing in London. I've seen it time and time again. So if you're new to coming to a city like London or somewhere else in a city in America, just be really conscious of what you're actually giving up and what you're actually gaining. Yes, you might be getting money in through a decent salary, but you might be spending way more living in a big city, most likely. And if you have to kill yourself and work overtime and not get paid any extra, is it really worth it? There are a lot of social spending pressures in London as well, and any big city that you're in. There's been lots of jobs that I've been in here in London over my last 10 years, right? And the majority of them, there was an expectation that you had to go to a pub or you had to go out for lunch with friends and colleagues, that you had to go to networking events after work. And a lot of these things can just drain your finances, because you may be spending an awful lot on rent and now you have to, and feel pressured to, eat out at lunch with your colleagues, go to the pub after work, socialize with people. Otherwise, you'll just be going back to an empty room, which is very lonely, let's be honest. So there's that pressure to earn more and to grow and to get promotion, like any place in the world. But there's also that social pressure, more in London than I've ever experienced, where you have to feel like you're spending money, that you have to feel like you're wearing really decent clothes when you're going to work, that you have to spend an awful lot, even just walking out your front door. So let's go on to the second point, which is mental health in a city like London, which is full of wealth. Yes, there are a lot of parks in London, and yes, there are a lot of free things that can boost your mental health. Like, for example, there's a Buddhist centre in East London, which I've been to a couple of times, and it's amazing because it's free or else you give a donation. Or there's lots of gyms like Pure Gym where it's only £30 a month to go to the gym, which is amazing for your mental health and physical health, right? So there is a lot to offer. And the great thing is there is a really diverse, pool of people here as well. You could walk down the street and find a cuisine of any culture that you want, really. And you can get talking to people from different backgrounds to your own. And of course, that expands your mind and is only going to benefit you in the future. However, the cons of a city like London is, of course, that work-life balance, that constant stress that's on your shoulders of, can you afford to get out of the renting game? Can you afford to live this lifestyle? And of course, the high costs, the commuting in and out, and also sometimes the loneliness. I know when I first moved to London and I didn't really know anyone at all, and it was incredibly lonely because I was in a house share with 5 other people I didn't even know, okay? And that house had no living room whatsoever because the landlord was so stingy that he converted the living room into another bedroom. So you're in this space where you're in this house with 5 people you don't know. There's no place like a sitting room to sit down and chat and get to interact with people. So you just felt like you had to go back to your bedroom after work. And it was an incredibly lonely cycle at the start of my journey here about 10 years ago. And there was a point where I was actually going to move back to Ireland because I was just like, feck this is shite. Like, you can't even talk to anyone. I had no money. I had 16 grand of a salary when I first came to London. And at that point, you just couldn't afford to even do anything fun and you didn't know anybody. However, coming from that culture into London, and I remember saying hello to people on the tube, or like I would pass someone in the car and I'd wave at them. And I would just always be met with like, oh my God, this girl is an absolute weirdo. Like, who is she? But it was just like a difference in culture that took a while to, get used to the London culture where no one talks to anyone. So that can, of course, affect your mental health. And you do have to be careful of it if you move to a big city, especially a wealthy city. And if you're on a low salary to start with, it can cost an awful lot to even just have fun. Even just to go on tubes in and out, it can cost this much for a 1 to 2 zone monthly pass. And even something like a cocktail can cost £15. So if you're on a bit of a low salary or your costs are really high, it's just really hard to socialize with that sort of money. So mental health can be at risk. And I would just highlight to just be careful if you're moving to a city alone, to make sure that maybe you've got an emergency pot of money before you move here. An emergency pot of money is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So if you've got that underneath your belt, and let's say you got made redundant in a big city where you don't know anyone, at least you've got a bit of a cushion there to look after yourself. So really make sure that you do a viewing of the house before you rent in it. And yes, it is great to, move in with someone you know, but if you don't know them, really try and find housemates with a similar age group so that you can be social together and learn about London together. There's also really good like running clubs, especially in East London, that are free. Or, there's meetups on Facebook groups where you can meet people from your culture. I know there's an Irish in London group that I sometimes dip into, which is great. So there's always resources out there, but I guess just to be cautious that it can be really easy to fall into just going to work, going to your bedroom and being alone, going to work, going to your bedroom to be alone, which is so not good for your mental health overall. So just a bit of a watch out, and something that's very common in London that isn't really spoken about. So let's talk about the third point, which is the psychological impact of living in a wealthy city. So as I mentioned at the start, there is a perfect pool of people here of all different cultures. And learning and being alongside them really opens up your mind. Also, you're surrounded by people who really want to grow. And, they might have a high-flying job and you might have met them at a meetup. So if you're surrounding yourself with people who have really high-flyer jobs, of course you're going to learn from them and absorb that, And that will push you to improve. If you're surrounded by people who really want to, get the most out of life, who really want to push themselves and do well in their career, that will, of course, come on top of you too, which is great. And being in an area where it's quite competitive and there's a lot of people that can, of course, build up your resilience and improve your problem solving. And what I mean by this is if you're living in a very tough city where you don't know anyone, it might push you out of your comfort zone to actually talk to people that you've never spoken to before, to maybe go to meetups where you are a stranger and everyone is a stranger, but that's how you make friends, okay? You adapt to the situation around you. And even though London is an incredibly wealthy city, sometimes it doesn't feel like that, you know? I mentioned the NHS at the start of this video, which is the healthcare system in the UK, and they have been struggling for years. And, you know, if you go in there, it's a really long wait time. So what I would say to yourself is to always look after your health, to try like preventative measures, to maybe like go for a run with a friend that you've just met in London, to maybe do more meditation, to do more yoga. There's yoga classes everywhere. I pay £50 for an unlimited yoga pass every month, which is actually pretty good value. So there is a lot of things there to look after your health and to adapt yourself once you start to Google things around you. The cons of this, of course, is to kind of maybe fall into a consumerism trap if you're not careful. Because there is so much around London, you know, you walk down any street and you're hit by H&M, by Zara, by Primark, or else the next street over would be Chanel, Louis Vuitton. There's a really weird melting pot of every shop under the sun in London. And if you go to somewhere like Stratford, they've got these massive shopping centre here with, honest to God, hundreds of shops. So this might be more of a temptation to fall into more expenditure, which of course makes it difficult for you to save. So if you're not in the right money mindset when you come to a big city like London or other wealthy cities in the world like New York or Dubai, you could of course fall into more consumerism than you had previously. It can be a bit of a trap if you're not careful. Also, if you're seeing extreme examples of wealth in a city, it can maybe make you feel inadequate. Even if you're on a decent salary like 50 or 60 grand, if you're walking past people on the street who are clearly millionaires or who have an extreme amount of wealth, it can make you feel lower than you are. So you really have to put things in perspective when you live in a wealthy city, but you're not wealthy yourself. You should always live within your means and not to try and leak into credit cards every month, which has happened to me when I was younger. You know, when I had a really low salary, like 16 grand, I come into London first, like that was nothing. Of course, there were times when, you know, it felt like leaking into a credit card was the only way I could live the life there. But I soon realized that I didn't want this cycle of constantly having to get a paycheck to pay that debt, but then having to go on a credit card again to live the life that I wanted. It's best to understand what money you have coming in right now and to build a budget for yourself based on your needs, your wants, and your savings, and to always make sure you have a savings pot for yourself. Just because you live in a wealthy city, it doesn't mean that you're wealthy and that you should do all the activities that wealthy people do. So kind of check yourself there and ensure that you're living within the means that you have. And of course, it's great to strive for more. If you surround yourself in a city that is a wealthy city like London, you of course will be boosted with the confidence to go for more promotions, or maybe to be an entrepreneur and to try a YouTube channel like this. So if you want to improve your lifestyle, I'll pop 2 videos here which will help you out on your money journey. But until then, guys, I tend to post 2 videos a week and I'm fairly new. So if you could subscribe, that would really help the channel out. Okay, thanks guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.